Okay, so we're going to come into a Virasana action, sitting onto a brick. Now, if this is difficult for you, you sit up much higher. You can have full foam pads, whatever you need to sit on. But we're going to, for those who are able to, take a brick between the heels, have the knees and the inner thighs together, pull on the calf flesh so that we can sit down into our Virasana in that way. Now the kneecaps need to be facing forwards like headlights, and the central plane of the thighs needs to be facing the ceiling. So I'll give you some instructions on that when we go into it. So maybe you'd work like that. If there's any discomfort in the knees, then you need to come higher. There's no question about it. Okay, you can always sit like that with a little bit of extra support underneath the sitting bones. So we're coming into this. Knees and thighs are together. The brick comes between your inner ankles. And make sure that your feet are going straight back. Then put your fingers in behind the knee joint and pull the calf flesh out to the side and sit down. Then use your fingers and open out in your toes. So we're trying to get that breadth and broadness across the sole of the foot on each side. Now, if you have a look at your knees and inner thighs should be together at this point. If you look at your knees, the kneecaps should be facing forwards, all right? So it's like a pair of headlights, but it can be quite difficult to get that if you probably can't see this because I'm wearing black leggings, but there I'm letting my thighs roll in and my kneecaps have started to also rotate inwards. So the way that we stop doing that is by gripping the brick with the inner ankles and pressing down with the fronts of the feet, and then moving those outer ankles in and pressing down with the little toe side of the foot. So hopefully you've got the central plane of your thighs now facing towards the ceiling. So we're just going to lift and lengthen here on the shin bone and skin so that we've got more of the front of the shin in contact with the floor. Often when we start in our yoga practice, the shin is very distant from the floor because of stiffness in the ankles, and you get a very big gap underneath your shins. When I started, you could have driven a truck underneath my shins. So now my shins are more or less on the floor, and it just takes a little while before the ankles become more flexible and can do this. Okay, so you're pressing down with the outer shins, you're pressing down with the little toe side, you're moving in with the outer ankle. Roll your shoulders back and down. We're going to come into Garadasana Arms. So I'm just going to show this. Now it might be that your arms come like this and you just press, or it may be that you can wrap your arms over. It's not a competition to see who can get the arms wrapped the furthest. You can get just as good an action by just pressing the upper arms together. Alright, so take the upper arms up, let the shoulder blades release down. Lift your right arm up and take it over the top of your left arm, and then see, can you cross as much as possible and push those arms away from one another. So you're making contact with those upper arms and opening out in the shoulder joints. Now if you can fold into the Garadasana action, that's fine, but don't get too caught up in that. That's not the point of the pose. So those who wrap very easily like this, you lift your elbows and move your thumbs away from you. But the main action is pushing your arms towards one another to get the opening in the back of the shoulders. So don't overdo, it's quite a strong pose. Breathe, and now releasing. Just roll your shoulders back and down. Take the arms up again. Take the left arm over the top of the right arm and press those arms together. So your left upper arm presses against your right lower arm to get some movement and action. And then if you're able to, you can wrap. So you'll probably find that one side does it a little more comfortably than the other. For those, as I say, who've got this action where you're wrapping, then you have to make something happen. So you press your arms against one another, lift your elbows, and move your thumbs away from the face. If you're just working in this action, then you're just pressing the arms against one another. It might be that the arms don't come that far and you're here, but again, you can press those lower arms against one another and get that action in the shoulders. You won't miss out with that. All right, releasing, roll your shoulders back and down and lift your chest. So we're going to come forwards into Adho Mukha Virasana. Hopefully you've got your other brick quite handy here, because we are going to come forwards. If you've got a lot of height behind you, it may be best to take your head onto the seat of a chair. But I'm just going to show. I'm going to come back a little bit. So if you can bear to stay in your Virasana, then stay in it. I'm just coming back because I think I'll come out of shot if I don't. So it gives you an opportunity to go and get your brick if you haven't already got it. So from here, we've got the feet going straight back. We haven't changed that. And we're keeping this abdomen back, keeping these frontal pelvic bones lifted so that we can extend the forehead onto the brick, and you're going to spider your fingers like that. Okay, so let's do that together. So again, getting this Virasana action where we're moving the outer ankles in and keeping the central plane of the thighs facing towards the ceiling. Now, just lift up again for a moment and shift back so that you can feel the front of your sitting bones on that brick, and move the abdomen back towards your spine. From here, you're hinging at the hips, press down with the outer shins, press down with the outer edge of the feet, move the outer ankles in, walk the fingers forward, so you're spidering your fingers, walk the fingers forwards and extend just the forehead onto your brick. Make sure that it's centered, and then you can flatten your palms and let your breath settle. So the firmness of the brick is really quite nice on the forehead. It's a very good pose to do if you suffer from headaches. This is really a very nice pose to do. Let the shoulder blades release down towards the back waist. Be broad across your collarbones. Let the eyes soften and relax. Alright, so we're going to come up into a Dandasana action, so slowly coming up out of the pose. You're going to swing your legs, sit back onto your brick. You may need to take some of that support out if you've got a higher support for your Virasana, and stretch your legs out in front of you. Just pull the flesh of the buttocks out and back. It's a little bit wobbly sitting on this brick, but sit right forwards on the brick so that you can feel your sitting bones on it. Extend into your inner heels. Just have a look at your feet. You may find that your feet have gone a little bit pink from having been compressed in that action. This is very good for them. It does open out the ankles. It starts to tone the feet and the ankles, and it's good for knees as long as you're working without discomfort. So just press the fingers down, extend the crown of the head up, and stretch into your inner heels and draw your toes towards you. So we're going to come into a Setu Bandha action, and if you have 4 foam pads and a bolster, this is how you're going to work. Now if you don't have this equipment, you can just put a pillow vertically under your spine. So I'll show how the pose will look like that, with the feet to the wall and this kind of seesaw arrangement with your bolster on top of the foam pads. That's for people who have got a full amount of equipment. If you don't, you can always just take your feet up onto a book or something like that and then have a pillow vertically like that for your back. Alright, so I'll just show how we will work. Whichever support you're using, you must be able to get your shoulders onto the floor. So if you can't, it might be that you have to take those foam pads out or raise the level of the floor up by putting a blanket underneath your head and shoulders. You can see that I'm on this foam pad, my shoulders are off the floor. I'm holding the back of the neck. So I want to get my shoulders on the floor, so I'm pushing with my feet to slide the shoulders onto the floor, lengthening the back of the neck so that the throat becomes soft, the chin comes towards the chest, and then I can stretch my feet up. Now I've got my feet right up against the wall, which is probably the most comfortable way of doing it, but don't get too worried if you can't get the distance correct. But this is the pose that you're going to come into if you're able to. Alright, so let's do that together, either with your pillow or with your bolster. You can even use 4 foam pads or 2 foam pads and a blanket underneath the back of the spine. Okay, so we're just reclining back so that the shoulders are not touching the floor, holding the back of the skull, lengthening the back of the neck by pulling on the back of the skull. At the same time, push with your feet so that the skin of the back body starts to move away from the shoulders and down towards your back waist, so that when you rest your shoulders onto the floor, the back of the neck is long, the sides of the neck are long, the front of the throat is soft, and the chin is moving towards the chest. Then roll your shoulders under and stretch your feet out. So extend into your heels and roll your inner thighs towards one another. Now, if this is problematic on your lower back, then bend your knees, put your feet on the floor. If that doesn't solve the problem, then you just come out of the pose. All right, so just let your breath steady and settle. Fine inhalation, fine exhalation through the nostrils. Allow the eyes to close. Observe the space created by the bolster or the other support that you're using under your chest. So it allows the breath to flow. Alright, so we're going to come out of the poses now. So bend your knees, carefully roll to the right side, and then slowly bring yourselves into a seated position. Good. Okay, so we're going to come now into Supta Badakanasana, but we are using now a support behind the back and some supports for the thighs. You can use a pillow behind you, and you can use rolled blankets, which in some way are superior to the foam pads because these are a little bit hard. Or you could use a couple of cushions underneath your thighs. We come into a Badakanasana action. This is the bound angle pose, Badakanasana. And you can see this is the pose that we started off with when we had our backs to the wall. But this time you're sitting just ahead of your bolster. Again, you can have a little gap, about a hand's width, between your sacrum and the bolster. Now, for those of you who don't have a belt, you can just support the outer legs, bring the heels in and recline back. But it can be that if your hips are a little bit tight, you get a little drift action with the legs. So a belt is very nice to use in this to keep everything contained. Those of you who have a belt, you would make a long loop. You place it over your head, inside your knees and underneath your outer foot bones. Don't worry, I'll go through this again in a moment. And then bring the heels in towards you. Tighten your belt up. It's there for a purpose. It's not just there for decoration, so it needs to be doing something, holding things together. But the important thing is that you hold it down really quite low. And I have to organise this around my audio equipment. It needs to be down at the base of the sacrum when you recline back. And then you put your foam pads in, or your cushions or rolled blankets, whatever it might be. You don't prop up the legs, you support the thighs, and then you roll your shoulders back and down with the palms facing the ceiling. So let's do that pose together. Sit just ahead of your bolster or pillow or foam pads. Bring the soles of the feet together. Make sure that you're about a hand's width away, that you've got some support for your outer legs, that you've got a blanket or something similar for your head on your bolster. Then if you're using your belt, you take a big loop, place it over your head and shoulders and around your waist. Bring that belt through so that it's inside your knees, underneath your feet. Have the buckle pulling towards you so that the belt pulling towards you, and don't have the buckle onto your flesh because it will dig in and be uncomfortable. And then you hold that right down to the level of the sacrum. And then you bring the feet in as comfortable as possible, and this belt is it's taut but not really tight. And then you recline back. It might be helpful for you to lift your buttocks off the floor and push the flesh of the back of the pelvis towards your heels. For me, I like to just have a little bit of a roll underneath the back of the neck. Might not be suitable for you. You have to try it and see. Now, if you're using foam pads, you do need to stagger them. You don't want to have your foam pads doing that because you can see that just sticks your leg up in the air. You've got to have a support for your outer thighs and your outer knees, but not a propping up action. Lift and lengthen the back of the neck. Roll your shoulder blades down and under so that the palms face the ceiling as a consequence of the action in your shoulders. So this should be really comfortable, this pose. And if it's not, you need to make your adjustments so that it becomes comfortable. So allow your eyes to close, breath fine and even. Relax your facial features. Observe again how the support underneath the chest, which may be a bolster, it may be a pillow, maybe a rolled mat or a rolled blanket. Just have something under the chest to lift it. And observe how that lift in the chest affects your breath. Fine inhalation, fine exhalation through the nasal passages. Now, if your legs become uncomfortable, then by all means unravel yourselves from the pose, stretch your legs out.